The year was 2347, and humanity had no idea that everything was about to change. Deep in the cold darkness beyond Neptune, something massive was happening. 17 giant warships appeared out of nowhere, each one almost 3 kilometers long. They belonged to the Dominion, a powerful alien empire that had been conquering planets for thousands of years. Commander stood on his flagship and looked at the tiny blue planet in the distance. Earth looked so small and weak to him. He had done this many times before. 47 planets had fallen to his fleet. This one would be no different, or so he thought. Admiral Cole was sitting in her office at Fleet Command in Houston when the alarm started screaming. She was 53 years old with hair at her temples and tired eyes that had seen too much. She had served in the Earth military for 30 years and had never lost a single battle, but she had also never faced anything like this. Her officers rushed into the room with pale faces and shaking hands. They showed her the readings from their deep space sensors. 17 alien warships. Technology far beyond anything Earth had ever seen, and they were heading straight for them. The alien message came through every communication channel on Earth. They had been doing this for so long that they had perfected the art of talking to new species. Their words were cold and simple. Surrender your world. Resistance is mathematically futile. You have 72 hours. That was it. No greeting, no explanation, just a demand and a deadline. Read the message 3 times before she believed it was real. Then she called an emergency meeting in the war room buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Lieutenant Commander Samuel Price was the first to arrive. He was the fleet's intelligence officer, and he had already been digging through every piece of information he could find about these aliens. His findings were not good. The broadcast that Earth's probes had intercepted told a horrible story. 47 civilizations had been conquered by this empire. The average resistance time was only 6 days. Most species surrendered within hours of the first attack. And those that fought back were crushed without mercy. Ask the question that everyone was afraid to ask. What happened to the survivors? Samuel's face went even paler as he pulled up the data on the holographic display. The numbers were beyond terrible. 90% of every conquered population was killed. The remaining 10% were turned into slaves. Their cultures were destroyed. Their languages were forbidden. Their histories were erased. They did not just defeat their enemies. They wiped them from existence. President appeared on the screen from the government bunker in Washington. He was a calm man, the kind who never raised his voice even in the worst situations, but could see the fear hiding behind his steady expression. The World Council had been meeting for hours, he told her. Every nation had voted. Every leader had agreed. They were going to send one response to just one message, and then they would let the aliens decide if they still wanted this fight. The message that Earth sent out into space was unlike anything they had ever received. It contained no surrender. It contained no begging. It contained no empty threats or desperate bargaining. Instead, it contained history, human history, the real history that most species would have been ashamed to share. It showed the battles of ancient Greece, where 300 soldiers held back an army of thousands. It showed the frozen hell of Stalingrad, where millions died fighting over a single city. It showed the trenches of the First World War, where young men walked into certain death day after day. The message showed Hiroshima. It showed the mushroom cloud rising into the sky and the shadow of a city that used to exist. It showed the genocides, the revolutions, the civil wars. It showed what humans had done to each other across 10,000 years of recorded civilization. Every act of cruelty, every moment of savagery, every time humanity had chosen destruction over peace. The message held nothing back. It showed the absolute worst of what human beings were capable of doing. And at the very end of the transmission, there was a simple statement in every language they had ever encountered. We have done all of this to ourselves. Imagine what we will do to you. That was Earth's warning. That was humanity's response to the demand for surrender. Not a promise of peace. Not a plea for mercy. Just a simple reminder of what kind of species they were dealing with. Commander watched the entire transmission in his private quarters aboard the flagship. His second-in-command, a younger officer named stood beside him with growing unease. The images were disturbing even to a species that had conquered dozens of worlds. The sheer scale of human violence against their own kind was unlike anything in records. Most species fought occasional wars. Some had periods of conflict in their history, but this level of constant, brutal, endless warfare was something new. Suggested that perhaps they should request additional analysis before proceeding. Perhaps they should study this species more carefully before engaging them in battle. Perhaps the mathematics of this conquest were not as simple as they had assumed. Made a dismissive gesture with his long fingers. He had heard this kind of talk before from nervous officers. Primitive species always boasted about their strength, he said. It meant nothing. The humans fought among themselves because they lacked unity. That weakness would be their undoing. A species that could not stop killing itself would certainly fall to the war machine. He ordered the fleet to advance toward Earth. Back on the blue planet, Admiral Cole stood in the war room and watched the alien ships begin their approach. She had hoped the warning would be enough. She had hoped that showing what humanity was capable of would make them think twice. But the aliens were coming anyway. Either they had not understood the message, or they simply did not care. Either way, Earth was about to face the fight of its existence. Turned to her officers and began giving orders. The real fleet, the one they had been hiding for decades, was waiting behind Mars. 1,200 warships that they knew nothing about, secret weapons that had never been tested in real combat, and millions of soldiers who were ready to die for their planet. The aliens thought they knew what they were getting into. They thought this would be just another easy conquest. They were wrong. They were very, very wrong. The first battle was coming, and humanity was ready to show the universe exactly why that warning should have been taken seriously. The fleet moved through the solar system like a slow-moving storm. Commander felt confident as his ships passed the asteroid belt. His sensors showed Earth's defensive forces clearly. A few hundred small patrol ships and light cruisers scattered around the inner planets. Nothing that could challenge even one of his massive dreadnoughts. He had seen this pattern before on dozens of conquered worlds. The weak defenders would put up a brief resistance, suffer terrible losses, and then beg for mercy. It was always the same story. But did not know about Mars. He did not know what was hiding behind the red planet. Admiral Cole had been planning for this day for over 20 years. She knew that if aliens ever came to Earth, they would scan the solar system first. They would look for military installations and defensive fleets, so she had made sure they would find exactly what she wanted them to find. The patrol ships and light cruisers were real, but they were just a distraction. The true power of Earth's military was hidden behind Mars, using the planet's mass and the electromagnetic interference from the Olympus Mons power station to stay invisible to alien sensors. When the fleet passed the halfway point between Mars and Earth, gave the order, all ships engage. 1,200 warships emerged from behind the red planet like a swarm of angry insects. These were not the small patrol craft the aliens had detected. These were heavy cruisers, battleships, and 3 massive aircraft carriers that humanity had spent 40 years building in complete secrecy. The S Defiance, the S Resolution, and the S Conviction. Each carrier was almost as large as a dreadnought, and each one held hundreds of fighter craft. Captain Daniel commanded the Defiance. He was 38 years old and had been born on the lunar colony. He had never actually set foot on Earth in his entire life, but he had read every history book he could find. He had studied every great battle from every war humanity had ever fought. He had trained for this exact moment since he was old enough to hold a weapon. When the order came, he did not hesitate for even a second. Launch all fighters, he commanded. Tell them to aim for the sensor arrays. Blind them first. They had conquered many worlds, but they had never encountered a species that used small man-attack craft in space combat. Their entire military doctrine was built around large ships with overwhelming firepower, big guns and heavy armor. That was how wars were won in their experience. The swarm of tiny human fighters that came screaming toward their fleet was something completely new and utterly confusing. Lieutenant Maria Santos was one of those fighter pilots. She was 26 years old with dark hair and a smile that could light up any room. Her friends said she was too cheerful to be a soldier. But when she climbed into her fighter cockpit, all that cheerfulness turned into cold focus. She had volunteered for this mission knowing the odds. Small fighters against massive warships. Most of them would not survive. But if they could blind the enemy sensors, the larger Earth ships would have a chance. Maria flew her fighter directly at a destroyer. The alien ship was enormous, blocking out the stars behind it. Its weapons tried to track her, but she was too small and too fast. She dodged the plasma blasts and dove straight toward the sensor cluster on the ship's hull. At the last possible second, she hit the ejection button and felt herself thrown clear of her craft. The fighter slammed into the destroyer's sensors and exploded in a ball of fire. The massive ship went dark, unable to see or target anything around it. Maria drifted in the cold void of space, watching the battle unfold around her. Explosions lit up the darkness like distant fireworks. Earth ships and ships traded fire in a deadly dance. She did not know if a rescue shuttle would ever find her. She did not know if she would live to see another day. But she did not regret her choice, not for a single moment. The battle lasted 9 hours. 9 hours of constant fighting, constant dying, constant destruction. The lost 18 ships, including 3 of their precious dreadnoughts. Earth lost 247 vessels. The mathematics said the aliens were winning, but mathematics did not tell the whole story. Commander watched the battle from a safe distance aboard his flagship. He was supposed to feel satisfied. His fleet was taking losses, yes, but the enemy was losing far more. By every standard measure, they were achieving victory. But something felt wrong. Something about the way these humans fought did not match anything in his experience. They sacrificed themselves, observed quietly, willingly, without any hesitation at all. Had seen brave soldiers before. He had seen species fight hard to defend their homes, but he had never seen anything like this. The human pilots flew their tiny ships directly into weapons arrays. They rammed their craft into engine ports and shield generators. They traded their lives for damage again and again without any sign of stopping. It was not logical. It was not efficient. It should not be happening. Our losses are within acceptable parameters, continued, but their tactics are unlike anything in our historical records. If they continue fighting this way, if they keep sacrificing themselves at this rate, the cost of victory may be higher than expected. They will run out of ships before we do, replied, but his voice did not carry the confidence it usually did. That night, alone in his private quarters, the commander watched the human warning transmission again. He studied the images of Stalingrad, where human soldiers had fought to the death over frozen ruins. He watched the footage of Normandy, where thousands had died trying to cross a few hundred meters of beach. He saw the look in human eyes as they charged into certain death. And for the first time in his very long career, Commander felt a cold sensation in his chest that he did not recognize. It took him several minutes to identify the feeling. It was doubt, real doubt, the kind that made warriors hesitate and conquerors pause. He had won today's battle by every measurable standard. But as he looked at the casualty reports and thought about what lay ahead, he could not shake the feeling that something had gone terribly wrong. These humans were not fighting like a species that expected to lose. They were fighting like a species that had already decided to win, no matter what the cost. The fleet continued toward Earth, but no longer felt certain about what they would find when they arrived. The fleet reached Earth orbit on the 14th day of the invasion. Their numbers had been reduced by the battle at Mars, but they still outnumbered humanity's remaining forces by 3 to 1. Commander looked down at the blue planet below and made a decision. These humans needed to understand the price of resistance. They needed to see what happened to species that refused to surrender. He ordered his ships to begin planetary bombardment. The first kinetic strikes hit the Atlantic Ocean. Massive metal rods, each one weighing several tons, dropped from orbit at incredible speeds. When they hit the water, they created waves unlike anything Earth had seen in thousands of years. Tsunamis rose up from the impact zones and rushed toward land. The eastern coast of North America had only hours to evacuate. Millions of people grabbed what they could carry and ran for higher ground. Thousands did not make it. The old coastal cities of the eastern seaboard disappeared under walls of water. President watched the destruction from the bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains. His advisors told him the casualty numbers. They showed him satellite images of flooded cities and burning coastlines. They suggested that perhaps it was time to negotiate. Perhaps surrender was the only way to save what remained of humanity. Perhaps fighting was no longer worth the cost. The president listened to all of it. Then he stood up and walked to the communication console. He was going to address the planet. Every human being still alive needed to hear what he was about to say. "They believe they can break us," he began, his voice steady despite the chaos happening above. "They believe that if they kill enough of us and destroy enough of our cities, we will submit. They do not understand what they are dealing with." He paused and looked directly into the camera. His eyes were tired, but his jaw was set with determination. "We are the species that survived ice ages and plagues. We are the species that walked through fire and came out the other side. We are the species that split the atom and walked on the moon. We have been killing each other for 10,000 years and we are still here. We will not kneel. Not today. Not ever." The speech was broadcast to every human settlement in the solar system. In the asteroid mining stations, workers stopped their machines and gathered around small screens. On the lunar colonies, families held each other and listened. On Mars, the survivors of the first battle raised their fists in the air. The message was clear. Humanity would not surrender. Humanity would fight to the last breath. Admiral Cole received the president's orders and began implementing the next phase of defense. Every civilian ship capable of reaching orbit was called into service. Cargo haulers were fitted with improvised missile launchers. Mining vessels were loaded with nuclear devices. Passenger shuttles were converted into flying bombs. The call went out for volunteers, and thousands of people stepped forward. They knew they would not be coming back. They did not care. The kamikaze attacks began on the 16th day of the invasion. Adams was 62 years old and had spent most of her life piloting a mining tug called the Sioux. She had 3 children and 7. She had been looking forward to retirement. But when the call for volunteers came, she did not hesitate. Her deserved a future, and if her old life could buy them even a small chance at that future, then it was worth spending. Flew the Sioux directly at a cruiser. The alien ship's weapons tried to stop her, but her little tug was too small and too fast. She aimed for the engine section where the armor was weakest. At the last moment, she opened a channel to Earth's communication network and spoke her final words. "This is for give them hell." The Sioux hit the cruiser's engines and detonated its nuclear payload. The explosion was massive. It not only destroyed the cruiser but also damaged 3 nearby vessels. Adams became the first of many heroes who would sacrifice everything in those desperate days. They did not understand what was happening. Their species had evolved beyond self-sacrifice. Self-preservation was the highest priority in their culture. The idea that a thinking, feeling being would willingly destroy itself to hurt an enemy was not just strange to them. It was completely impossible to comprehend. Yet it kept happening, again and again, day after day. Commander watched 47 human ships destroy themselves against his fleet in a single day. Each one took at least 1 vessel with them. Some took more. The mathematics of the invasion had changed dramatically. He was still winning by the numbers, but at this rate, there would be nothing left to conquer. "We are achieving victory," reported, "but our losses are becoming significant. If they continue these suicide attacks, we may not have enough ships left to occupy the planet. Then we must end this quickly," decided. "Prepare the ground forces. We will land on their planet, capture their leaders, and force them to surrender in person. Once we control their government, the population will have no choice but to submit. 20,000 soldiers prepared for planetary assault. They were the best warriors the Dominion had ever produced. Each one was tall, strong, and covered in natural armor that could stop most weapons. They had conquered dozens of worlds and had never faced a force they could not defeat. They loaded into their landing craft and descended toward the planet below. Their target was the ruins of what had once been Washington, D.C. Intelligence suggested that important human leaders were hiding somewhere in that region. They expected to find a broken city filled with frightened survivors. They expected easy victory against a demoralized population. They were wrong. Sergeant Christopher Blake was waiting for them. He had spent the last 7 years fighting in the resource wars of the 2340s. He had killed enemies with guns, knives, rocks, and his bare hands. He knew how to fight in cities. He knew how to use rubble and shadows and fear as weapons. And he had 6,000 soldiers under his command who were just as deadly as he was. The ground war was about to begin, and they had no idea what they were walking into. Sergeant Christopher Blake crouched in the ruins of the old Capitol building and watched the alien landing craft descend from the sky. He was 29 years old with a face full of scars and eyes that had seen too much death. The last 7 years of his life had been spent fighting in wars across 3 continents. He had learned that survival was not about being the strongest or the fastest. It was about being the most willing to do whatever it took to win. His squad gathered around him in the darkness. 12 soldiers, each one hand-picked for this mission. They were dirty, tired, and scared, but they were also ready. They had been preparing for this moment since the alien ships first appeared in the sky. Remember, Christopher told them quietly, they have better weapons than us. They have better armor than us. They have better numbers than us, but they have never fought in a city before. They do not know what rubble can hide. They do not know what shadows can do. This is our ground. This is our home. And we are going to make them pay for every single step they take. The soldiers landed in formation, their tall armored bodies moving with perfect precision. Each one stood over 2 meters tall and was covered in thick natural armor that could stop most human bullets. Their weapons fired plasma that could melt through steel. They had conquered dozens of planets and had never lost a ground engagement. They marched into the ruined streets of Washington expecting minimal resistance. The first ambush came without any warning at all. Private Lisa was hiding in the upper floor of a collapsed parking structure. She was 23 years old with short black hair and steady hands that never shook no matter how scared she felt inside. For the past week, she had been wiring an entire city block to explode on command. Every building, every street corner, every pile of rubble, all connected to a single detonator that she held in her palm. A platoon marched directly beneath her position. 40 soldiers in perfect formation, completely unaware of the trap they had walked into. Lisa waited until they were all in the kill zone. Then she pressed the button. 4 buildings collapsed at once. Thousands of tons of concrete and steel came crashing down on the alien soldiers below. The noise was incredible. Dust and debris filled the air. When it finally cleared, there was nothing left of the platoon but crushed armor and broken weapons. Lisa did not survive the explosion. The building she was hiding in came down with the others, but she had known that would happen when she volunteered for the mission. Her only regret was that she could not see the look on the alien commanders' faces when they realized what had happened. The battle for Washington lasted 11 days. 11 days of constant fighting in the ruins of a dead city. They had never experienced anything like it. Every street was a death trap. Every building was a fortress. Every shadow might hide a human soldier with a bomb or a knife or nothing but their bare hands and absolute determination. Christopher's squad held a single intersection for 3 full days. They threw assault after assault at their position, trying to break through. 17 times the aliens charged. 17 times they were pushed back. Christopher's people ran out of ammunition on the second day. They picked up weapons from the dead and kept fighting. When those weapons ran dry, they used explosives. When the explosives were gone, they used knives and rocks and anything else they could find. On the fourth day, Christopher got intelligence about a command post 6 blocks away. If they could capture the alien communications equipment, Earth's forces would be able to predict enemy movements for the rest of the battle. It was a suicide mission. The command post was heavily guarded and deep in enemy territory. Christopher did not even hesitate. He took 12 soldiers with him. They moved through the ruins like ghosts, avoiding patrols and slipping through gaps in the alien lines. It took them 6 hours to cover 3 kilometers. When they finally reached the command post, they attacked without warning. The fighting was brutal and close. Christopher killed 14 soldiers himself, most of them with a combat knife because his gun had jammed in the first minute. His soldiers fought just as hard. They were not trying to survive. They were trying to win. There was a difference, and the aliens were only just beginning to understand what that difference meant. 7 of Christopher's 12 soldiers died in the assault, but they killed 63 and captured all of the communications equipment. Christopher carried the heavy gear himself, 3 kilometers back through enemy territory, with 2 bullets in his leg that he refused to acknowledge until the mission was complete. The intelligence from that raid changed everything. Earth's commanders could now hear every order, predict every alien movement. The invaders had lost their advantage of surprise. For the rest of the battle, they were the ones walking into ambushes instead of setting them. Commander received the casualty reports aboard his flagship in orbit. 8,000 soldiers dead, another 4,000 wounded, almost half of his ground forces destroyed in just 11 days, and the humans showed no signs of slowing down. If anything, they were fighting harder with each passing day. "They fight like cornered animals," observed. No replied quietly. His voice was tired in a way it had never been before. Animals flee when the odds are hopeless. These creatures do not flee. They dig in deeper. They fight harder. They sacrifice more. They are not animals. They are something else entirely, something we have never encountered before. On the 11th day, made a decision that no commander had ever made in the history of their empire. He ordered his ground forces to withdraw from Washington. The soldiers who had never lost a battle retreated from a ruined city defended by creatures half their size. The news spread across Earth like wildfire. The aliens were falling back. The invincible conquerors were running away. Humanity had held the line. The cost had been terrible. Tens of thousands dead, cities destroyed, entire regions devastated. But they had done what no other species had ever done. They had made the bleed. Christopher Blake watched the enemy landing craft rise back into the sky from the same intersection he had defended for 3 days. His leg was wrapped in bloody bandages and he could barely stand. But he was smiling. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had looked death in the face and refused to blink. The battle for Earth was not over. But for the first time since the invasion began, humanity had a reason to hope. Commander stood alone on the bridge of his flagship and stared down at the blue planet below. His fleet was still powerful. His weapons could still burn cities. By every measure that mattered, he had the ability to continue the conquest. But something had changed inside him during these past weeks, something that no amount of military training could have prepared him for. He opened a communication channel to Earth's leadership. It was time to talk. Admiral Cole and President received the transmission in the war room beneath the Rocky Mountains. They had been expecting this. After the retreat from Washington, after the failed ground assault, after the endless stream of suicide attacks that had cost the so many ships, they knew the alien commander would want to negotiate. The question was what kind of terms he would offer. His image appeared on the screen. He looked different than he had in the early days of the invasion. Older somehow, though new that made no sense for an alien species. Tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. He spoke slowly and carefully, his words translated through the universal communication system. "You have proven yourselves worthy adversaries," he began. "The Dominion offers terms. Surrender half of your military forces and agree to tributary status. You will be allowed to govern yourselves under our supervision. Your culture will be preserved. Your people will not be enslaved. This is more than any other species has ever received from us. This is a generous offer." Stepped forward. She had spent her entire career preparing for moments like this. Moments when the fate of billions depended on the words she chose and the courage she showed. She took a deep breath and began to speak. "Let me tell you a story, Commander. In the year 1940, a nation called Britain stood alone against a force that had conquered all of Europe. They were outnumbered. Their cities were being bombed every night. Their people were starving. Their allies had fallen. By every logical measure, they should have surrendered. Their leader, a man named Churchill, was offered peace terms that would have preserved his nation as a subordinate state. It would have been the smart choice, the safe choice, the choice that would have saved millions of lives." She paused and let the silence stretch. He refused. His people chose to fight on, even when victory seemed absolutely impossible. They endured years of bombing and starvation and death. They never stopped fighting. They never stopped believing. And in the end, they won. Not because they were stronger than their enemies, but because they refused to stop. Because surrender was simply not something they were willing to consider. President stood beside her. His voice was calm but firm. "We are not offering you terms, Commander. We are giving you a chance to leave. Take your fleet. Return to your dominion. Tell them what you found here. Tell them that humanity is not worth the cost of conquest." Studied the two humans on his screen. He had negotiated with dozens of species over his long career. Most of them begged for mercy. Some tried to bargain for better terms. A few threatened violence they could not possibly deliver. But none of them had ever simply told him to go away. None of them had ever looked at his fleet and his weapons and his empire and decided they were not impressed. "If we continue this war," he said slowly, "we will eventually win. Your resources are limited. Your population is finite. Mathematics favors us. Maybe, admitted, but you have seen what we do when we are losing. You have seen our people fly their ships into your weapons. You have seen our soldiers fight to the death over piles of rubble. You have seen what we are willing to sacrifice just to hurt you. Now imagine what we will do when we are truly desperate. Imagine what we will do when there is nothing left to lose." Her voice grew harder, colder. "We will burn your fleet. We will poison your soldiers. We will curse your names with our dying breaths. You might eventually conquer this planet, but you will never hold it. Every generation will rise against you. Every child will be taught to hate you. We will be a wound that never heals, a thorn that never stops hurting. Is that what you want, Commander? Is that worth the cost of victory?" Was silent for a very long time. The bridge of his flagship was completely quiet. Even his officers did not dare to speak. "I have conquered 47 worlds," he finally said. "I have broken species that thought themselves unconquerable. I have crushed empires and ended civilizations. But I have never encountered anything like humanity. Not in all my years of war. Not in all the records of the Dominion." He made a gesture that his translation systems could not interpret. Something that might have been respect or fear or simply exhaustion. "You are the most terrifying species I have ever met. Not because of your weapons. Your weapons are primitive compared to ours. Not because of your technology. Your technology is centuries behind us. You terrify me because of what you are willing to do, what you are willing to sacrifice, what you are willing to become. You have looked at the mathematics of this war and decided that mathematics do not matter. You have looked at certain defeat and decided that defeat is not acceptable. I do not know how to fight an enemy like that. I do not think anyone does." He turned away from the screen for a moment, looking out at the stars. "I will recommend to the Dominion that Earth be designated a quarantine world, a place to be avoided by all ships, a warning to future generations. You have earned that much, at least. perhaps more than any species we have ever encountered. The communication ended. The screen went dark, and President looked at each other in the silence of the war room. Neither of them spoke for a long time. There were no words for what they were feeling. Relief and exhaustion and grief for all the people who had died to make this moment possible. The fleet from Earth's solar system the following day. They left behind 14,000 dead soldiers and 31 destroyed ships. They left behind a species they would never forget and would never dare to challenge again. Admiral Cole watched them go from the observation deck of the S Defiance. Captain Daniel stood beside her, his arm in a sling from injuries he had suffered in the final battle. The stars stretched out before them, infinite and cold and full of possibilities. "Do you think they will come back?" asked. Someday replied, "Maybe in 100 years, maybe 1,000, but when they do, we will be ready. We will always be ready." She looked out at the darkness that had once seemed so threatening and smiled. "We are humanity. We have been fighting since before their ancestors learned to walk upright, and we have never, ever given up." The Dominion added Earth to their official records with a single classification that would remain unchanged for centuries. The entry was simple and direct. It was transmitted to every species in their network, every ally and every enemy. It read, "The humans are deadly. They do not surrender. They do not retreat. They do not value their own lives above victory. If you encounter them, do not engage. Do not threaten. Do not provoke. They gave us one warning and we did not listen. Learn from our mistake." In the centuries that followed, humanity expanded into the galaxy. They found the ruins of civilizations they had destroyed. They wept for species they had never known. They built monuments on dead worlds to honor the fallen. And whenever they encountered a new species, they offered the same greeting: "We come in peace. But if you choose war, know what you are choosing. We are humanity, and we never stop fighting." Some species laughed at the warning. They learned better quickly. Most species did not laugh at all. They had heard the stories. They knew the history. They understood what kind of creatures had come from that small blue planet. The smart ones listened. The smart ones always did.